Hello, it's May 31st, 2017. Today, in my next video about the maintenance of my 1936 wooden powerboat, I am going to be painting the starboard side on the top sides, right over here. She's all sanded out and masked. All that remains to be done is to go over the boat with a tack cloth, and then I'm going to start rolling the paint on. So you will get to see the transition from a rough looking hull to shiny gloss paint. Okay, let's get going. Okay, while I'm painting in speeded up fashion, I'm going to describe the procedure. Because the hull is divided into two parts by a rub rail, the portholes are above the rub rail and the lower part of the hull is below it, I paint the hull in two parts. Basically what I do is I start at the stern and work forward painting above the rub rail. For the back 15 feet or so of the boat, the gap between the rub rail and the upper trim is only about 4.5 to 5 inches, so it's too narrow to roll out properly. Consequently, I brush painted that up to the break in the shear line. Once I got to that point, I got out my roller and started doing what I call roll and roll tip. Basically, the procedure is pretty straightforward. I roll the paint on, I wet out the roller and roll the paint on, then I use the roller to even out the paint. Well, there's a fair amount of paint on the roller, these foam rollers, and I'm using a 4-inch foam roller here. These foam rollers leave a lot of small bubbles in the paint. So once I'm happy with the distribution of paint on a surface, I go back over it with a nearly dry roller and just very lightly go over the surface to break the bubbles. And you'll see me doing this just before I move on each time. I'm rolling back and forth, usually along the length of the planks, in order to break all the bubbles. And sometimes this takes a while. If there's a little bit more paint in a spot, I might roll it out a little bit more and then go back over it again to break the bubbles. And I move on. So I move from the stern of the boat to the bow above the rub rail, and then once I got up to the bow, I moved down and I was able to work without the step ladder, which makes things go a lot more quickly, and paint just below the rub rail, working aft. I worked all the way aft until I was only about 4 feet from the end where there's another little rub strake, and at that point I ran out of paint in my roller pan. So since I only had about a 4 foot by 18-inch strip to go, I simply brush painted that rather than dump more paint in a roller pan and possibly get more than I needed in there. Okay, so what does this project involve? Before I painted, I replaced a couple planks on this side, and I faired them in with a sander, and after that I put 3 coats of paint on them to prime them, sanded between coats, and let the last coat dry over the winter. I did that work in the fall. After that, I went back to it this spring, and I sanded out the entire side of the boat with my random orbital sander using 220 grit paper. When that was finished, I masked off the entire surface of the boat, all around all the trim, and then wiped down the surface completely. And just before I started painting today, I went back over it again with a tack cloth and tacked it off to remove all the remaining dust. Okay, I'm all done. I've rolled out the entire starboard side, top sides, and got a pretty decent job, if I do say so myself. It took 1 hour and 19 minutes from the time I started until I was finished, and that included going over to fool with the camera. Okay, thanks for watching. I hope that you have a feel for just how easy this sort of project can be All of the work is in the preparation. It took a lot more than 2 hours to get the hull ready to put this coat of paint on. Thank you very much. Please subscribe if you'd like to see more. I'd like to see a thumbs up down there. But if you want to go thumbs down because you don't like the way I did this, fine with me. Please, though, post a comment and explain why, so that I can hopefully make you happy with my next video.